Hi there. Thank you for being here with me today. If you're listening to this, maybe you're searching for answers. Or maybe just a little hope. My name is Elara, and this is my story. How I rebuilt my identity from scratch after narcissistic abuse. It's not a tale of heroism in the traditional sense. There are no epic battles or fairy tale endings. But it is a story of survival, of losing myself, and then slowly, painfully reclaiming every piece. If you've ever felt invisible, doubted your worth, or questioned your reality, I want you to know, you're not alone. This story is for you. My name's Elara, and this is the story of how I rebuilt myself after a relationship that nearly shattered me. It's not a tale of grand heroics or fantastical adventures, but rather a deeply personal and often painful journey of healing from narcissistic abuse and reclaiming my identity. For years, I was entangled with a man named Julian, a charismatic, intelligent, and seemingly perfect partner. He swept me off my feet with romantic gestures, declarations of undying love, and promises of a future filled with happiness. Looking back, I see the red flags I so willingly ignored, blinded by what I believed was genuine affection. Julian was a master manipulator, skilled at subtly undermining my confidence, isolating me from my friends and family, and rewriting my reality. It started subtly, with seemingly harmless criticisms disguised as constructive feedback. My clothing choices were slightly off, my career aspirations were unrealistic, and my friends were a bad influence. Over time, these comments eroded my self-esteem, making me question my own judgment and rely increasingly on Julian's approval. He would gaslight me relentlessly, denying events that had clearly occurred, twisting my words and making me feel like I was losing my mind. I remember one particular incident vividly. I had planned a surprise birthday party for my best friend, Sarah. Julian, knowing how much this meant to me, feigned enthusiasm and offered to help with the preparations. However, on the day of the party, he conveniently forgot to pick up the cake, claiming he had a sudden and urgent work meeting. When I confronted him about it, he vehemently denied ever agreeing to pick up the cake, accusing me of being overly demanding and unreasonable. I was left feeling confused, hurt, and doubting my own memory. This was just one example of the countless ways Julian manipulated me, creating a constant state of anxiety and self-doubt. He isolated me from my support network by subtly turning me against my friends and family. He would make disparaging remarks about them, suggesting they were jealous of our relationship or that they didn't truly understand me. Gradually, I began to distance myself from them, believing Julian's lies and prioritizing his needs above everyone else's. My once vibrant social life dwindled to nothing, leaving me completely dependent on Julian for companionship and validation. The emotional abuse escalated over time, becoming more frequent and intense. Julian would constantly criticize me, belittle my accomplishments, and make me feel worthless. He would withhold affection, give me the silent treatment, and threatened to leave me if I didn't meet his impossible standards. I walked on eggshells, constantly trying to anticipate his moods and avoid triggering his anger. I became a shell of my former self, losing my sense of identity, my passions, and my zest for life. I was trapped in a cycle of abuse, feeling powerless to escape. The breaking point came one evening after a particularly heated argument. Julian had accused me of flirting with a waiter at a restaurant, despite the fact that I had barely spoken to him. He launched into a tirade of insults, calling me names and accusing me of being unfaithful. I tried to defend myself, but my words were drowned out by his rage. He grabbed my arm, his grip tightening painfully. In that moment, something inside me snapped. I realized that I couldn't continue living like this. I had to escape, even if it meant facing the unknown alone. The next morning, while Julian was at work, I packed a small bag with essential belongings and fled. I didn't know where I was going or what I would do, but I knew I couldn't stay in that toxic environment any longer. I drove to my sister's house feeling like a fugitive on the run. My sister Emily was shocked to see me in such a state. She had noticed a change in me over the past few years, but she hadn't fully grasped the extent of the abuse I was enduring. I broke down in tears, recounting the years of manipulation, gaslighting, and emotional torment. Emily listened patiently, offering comfort and support. She assured me that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't alone, and that she would help me get through this. With Emily's help, I started the long and arduous process of healing. The first few weeks were the hardest. I was plagued by anxiety, guilt, and self-doubt. I missed Julian terribly, despite the abuse I had suffered. I questioned whether I had made the right decision, wondering if I had overreacted or misinterpreted his behavior. Emily encouraged me to seek therapy, and I eventually found a therapist who specialized in narcissistic abuse recovery. Therapy was instrumental in helping me understand the dynamics of the abusive relationship and to recognize the patterns of manipulation that Julian had employed. I learned about gaslighting, emotional blackmail, and other tactics that narcissists use to control and dominate their victims. I began to understand that Julian's behavior was not a reflection of my worth or my flaws, but rather a manifestation of his own deep-seated insecurities and personality disorder. Through therapy, I also started to address the underlying issues that had made me vulnerable to narcissistic abuse in the first place. I had always struggled with low self-esteem and a tendency to seek validation from others. I learned to challenge my negative self-beliefs and to develop a stronger sense of self-worth. I also started to set healthy boundaries in my relationships, learning to say no and to prioritize my own needs. In addition to therapy, I found solace and support in online communities of narcissistic abuse survivors. Connecting with others who had experienced a similar trauma was incredibly validating and empowering. I realized that I wasn't alone in my struggles and that there was hope for healing and recovery. I started to reconnect with my old friends, explaining what had happened and apologizing for my absence. They were understanding and supportive, welcoming me back with open arms. I also started to pursue my passions again, rediscovering the hobbies and interests that I had abandoned during my relationship with Julian. I took up painting, joined a book club, and started volunteering at a local animal shelter. These activities helped me to reconnect with my authentic self and to find joy and meaning in life again. As I healed, I began to realize that the abuse I had suffered had fundamentally changed me. It had stripped away my innocence, my trust, and my sense of security. But it had also made me stronger, more resilient, and more compassionate. I had learned valuable lessons about myself, about relationships, and about the importance of self-love. I decided to use my experience to help others who were struggling with narcissistic abuse. I started a blog, sharing my story and offering advice and support to survivors. I also became an advocate for abuse awareness, speaking at events, and raising awareness about the insidious nature of narcissistic abuse. Rebuilding my identity after narcissistic abuse was not an easy process. It was a long and challenging journey filled with pain, tears, and setbacks. But it was also a journey of growth, self-discovery, and empowerment. I emerged from the darkness stronger, wiser, and more authentic than ever before. I learned that I am worthy of love, respect, and happiness. I learned that I am capable of overcoming adversity. And I learned that I have the power to create a life that is aligned with my values and my dreams. Today, I am living a life that is filled with joy, purpose, and meaningful connections. I am surrounded by people who love and support me for who I am. I am pursuing my passions and making a difference in the world. And I am grateful for every day that I have. If you are struggling with narcissistic abuse, please know that you are not alone. There's hope for healing and recovery. Reach out for help, connect with others, and never give up on yourself. You are worthy of love, respect, and happiness. You have the power to rebuild your identity and to create a life that is filled with joy, purpose, and meaning. My healing journey took a multi-pronged approach. It wasn't just therapy, though that was crucial. It was also about reclaiming the pieces of myself that Julian had systematically chipped away at. He'd criticized my artistic inclinations, calling them frivolous and impractical. So I enrolled in a pottery class. The feel of the clay between my fingers, the slow, deliberate shaping of something beautiful from a lump of earth, it was incredibly therapeutic. It was a tangible representation of rebuilding myself, of creating something new and strong from broken pieces. He dismissed my love of hiking, claiming it was a waste of time and that I should be focusing on more productive activities. So, I started hiking again, exploring the local trails and rediscovering the peace and serenity of nature. The physical exertion, the fresh air, the stunning views, it all helped to clear my head and reconnect me with my body. He'd ridicule my close friendships, sowing seeds of doubt and jealousy until I distanced myself from the people who truly cared about me. So, I reached out to those friends, apologizing for my absence and rebuilding those bonds. It wasn't easy. Some were hurt and confused, but they were all ultimately forgiving and supportive. Their presence in my life reminded me of the joy and connection I had been missing. Julian's influence had seeped into every aspect of my life, poisoning my thoughts and actions. I had to actively dismantle his narrative and replace it with my own. This involved challenging his negative pronouncements, questioning his motives, and rewriting my internal dialogue. For example, he'd often told me that I was too sensitive and that I needed to toughen up. This had led me to believe that my empathy and compassion were weaknesses. But through therapy, I learned that these qualities were actually strengths, that they made me a caring and supportive friend, a compassionate advocate, and a loving human being. I embraced my sensitivity, learning to protect myself from those who would exploit it while still remaining open and empathetic to others. He'd also instilled in me a fear of failure, constantly reminding me of my past mistakes and discouraging me from taking risks. This had stifled my creativity and prevented me from pursuing my dreams. I realized that I needed to redefine my definition of success. It wasn't about achieving perfection or meeting external expectations, but rather about embracing the journey, learning from my mistakes, and pursuing my passions with courage and authenticity. I started setting small, achievable goals, celebrating my progress along the way, and refusing to let fear hold me back. One of the most difficult challenges was forgiving myself for staying in the abusive relationship for so long. I blamed myself for not seeing the red flags, for ignoring my intuition, and for allowing Julian to control me. I felt ashamed and embarrassed, wondering how I could have been so blind. My therapist helped me to understand that I was not to blame. Narcissistic abuse is a form of psychological warfare, and Julian was a skilled manipulator. I was not weak or stupid. I was simply a victim of his abuse. I learned to treat myself with compassion and understanding, recognizing that I had done the best I could with the knowledge and resources I had at the time. As I healed, I realized that the experience had not only broken me down but had also built me back up in a new and stronger form. I had developed resilience, self-awareness, and a deep appreciation for life. I had learned to trust my intuition, to set healthy boundaries, and to prioritize my own well-being. I had discovered my inner strength and my ability to overcome adversity. I also realized that my experience could be used to help others. I became passionate about raising awareness about narcissistic abuse and empowering survivors to heal and rebuild their lives. I started volunteering at a local domestic violence shelter, offering support and guidance to women who are going through similar experiences. I also created an online community where survivors could connect, share their stories, and find resources. My journey of rebuilding my identity after narcissistic abuse is an ongoing process. There are still days when I struggle with anxiety, self-doubt, and lingering feelings of pain. But I am no longer defined by my past. I am defined by my resilience, my strength, and my commitment to living a life that is filled with joy, purpose, and authenticity. And that is a victory worth celebrating. The lingering impact of narcissistic abuse is insidious. It's not just the big dramatic events that leave scars, but the subtle, everyday manipulations that erode your sense of self. Even years after leaving Julian, I found myself questioning my perceptions, second-guessing my decisions, and struggling to trust my own judgment. The gaslighting had been so effective that I had internalized his distorted version of reality. One of the ways I combated this was by keeping a journal. Every day, I would write down my thoughts, feelings, and experiences, focusing on objective facts rather than subjective interpretations. This helped me to clarify my thinking, identify patterns of manipulation, and validate my own perceptions. I would also review past entries, looking for instances where Julian had tried to distort my reality or undermine my confidence. This exercise was incredibly empowering as it allowed me to reclaim my narrative and challenge his lies. Another lingering effect of the abuse was a deep-seated fear of intimacy. Julian had used intimacy as a weapon, showering me with affection and attention only to withdraw it later as a form of punishment. This had created a cycle of craving and rejection that left me feeling anxious and insecure in relationships. I realized that I needed to redefine intimacy on my own terms. It wasn't just about physical closeness or romantic gestures, but about emotional vulnerability, mutual respect, and authentic connection. I started by building deeper connections with my friends and family, sharing my thoughts and feelings openly and honestly. This helped me to practice vulnerability in a safe and supportive environment. I also sought guidance from my therapist on how to navigate romantic relationships in a healthy and sustainable way. She encouraged me to be patient with myself, to set clear boundaries, and to prioritize my own well-being. Learning to trust again was perhaps the most challenging aspect of my recovery. Julian had betrayed my trust in so many ways that I had become hypervigilant, constantly scanning for red flags and anticipating the worst. I realized that I couldn't live in a state of perpetual fear and suspicion. I needed to find a way to trust again, but without being naive or reckless. I started by trusting myself. I learned to listen to my intuition, to honor my feelings, and to make decisions that were aligned with my values. I also learned to be discerning about who I allowed into my inner circle. I surrounded myself with people who were kind, compassionate, and trustworthy, and I distanced myself from those who were toxic or manipulative. Trust is not something that can be forced or demanded. It is something that is earned over time through consistent actions and genuine connection. And it is a gift that should be given freely, but only to those who have proven themselves worthy. Rebuilding my identity after narcissistic abuse was not a linear process. There were ups and downs, setbacks and breakthroughs. But with each step forward, I grew stronger, wiser, and more resilient. And I emerged from the darkness with a renewed sense of self, a deep appreciation for life, and a burning desire to help others find their way to the light. This is not the end of my story, but rather the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter that is filled with hope, possibility, and the unwavering belief in my own worth. This is the story of how I not only survived but thrived after narcissistic abuse. And it is a story that I share with the world, hoping to inspire others to reclaim their own lives and to create a future that is filled with joy, purpose, and authentic connection. Thank you for listening. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt lost, silenced, or broken by someone who claimed to love you, please know you are not alone. Healing is possible, rebuilding is possible, and you are worthy of both. If you're on your own journey of recovery, take it one step at a time, reach out, speak your truth, find your people, and never ever give up on yourself. If this story brought you comfort or insight, consider sharing it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, stories of healing, strength, and rediscovery, don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment, or simply let us know you're out there. Your story matters too. Take care of your heart. Take care of your voice. and keep moving toward the life you deserve.